This is the data overview for Red Top Middle School, and my name is Caitlin Hamilton. The purpose of this data overview is to review data to see where improvement is needed at our school. As we review this data, we will discuss instructional changes that may need to be made to increase CCRPI. And the reason we're talking about CCRPI is we had a large drop this year. So it was a 12.2 point decrease to a score of 52.5. So changes are definitely needed since we had this huge drop in our CCRPI score. And this data should point us in the right direction with these changes. Our guiding questions include how can we increase CCRPI? That is our main focus. And as we dive into that, we want to know how we can move our level 1 and 2 kids to be 3 and 4 kids. Our demographics at Red Top Middle School. Our number of students enrolled has been decreasing over the past 5 years. So what this means for us is we may be losing more teachers if enrollment continue to decrease. So you can see from 2014 to this past year, 2018, that our numbers have gone down. We did see a spike in 2016, but our FTE numbers for 2018 were significantly lower than the past couple of years. When it comes to our teachers, since we have seen this decrease in student population, we've also seen a decrease in our number of teachers since we are losing allotment numbers with a student decrease, but we are gaining more teachers with higher levels of education, including master's, specialists, and doctorates. While most of our subgroups have stayed consistent over the past years, our ELL population has increased. So what this means for us is we have gained a full-time ESLL teacher, and we will have more supports for these students in classes. We will need an increasing amount of resources and support as this population increases. Students and personnel, comparing the two, you can see that while 92% of our staff is white, only 67% of our student population is white. What this means for us is we may need training for teaching culturally diverse student populations and bringing in culturally responsive strategies into our classrooms. Our milestones results. Starting with English Language Arts, you can see this is a comparison from Red Top Middle School to Bartow County to Georgia. Red Top Middle School, our results have more students performing at the beginning level or level 1 than Bartow County in Georgia, and we have less students performing at level 4 or distinguished than Bartow County and Georgia. So for example, we only had 3.4 students performing at that level, while Bartow County had 5% and Georgia had 7.9%. Diving into our students at Red Top Middle School, we tested 602 students for the 2019 ELA milestones. Our strengths include our 6th grade scores. So we had 41.1% of 6th graders scoring at proficient and above, so level 3 and level 4. Some weaknesses would be our 7th grade. We had 42% of students performing at level 1. And in 8th grade, we had 38% of students performing at level 1. Our math milestones, this is again comparing Red Top Middle School to our district and state. And again, we have more students performing at level 1. We have 28.8% of students performing at level 1. So we have more students at level 1 than Bartow County and Georgia. And again, we have less students performing at level 4 or distinguished than Bartow County and Georgia. Going into our scores here at Red Top Middle School, we tested 601 students for the math milestones in May 2019. And our strengths, again, include our 6th graders. So we had 37.7% of 6th graders scoring at proficient or above. Our weaknesses would be 8th grade math. We had 40 students, 40% of students performing at level 1 or beginning. We also had 34% of students for 7th graders performing at that level 1. Science and social studies are only tested in 8th grade. So this is just our 8th grade students. And again, we have more students performing at the beginning level than both Bartow County and Georgia. And we only had 26.9% of students at the 3 or 4 level, proficient or distinguished, which is significantly smaller percent than Bartow County and the state of Georgia. So what this means for us is we may need to redesign science curriculum or incorporate more common formative assessment so teachers are able to assess student learning more effectively before it gets to the milestones. Again, social studies is only tested at the 8th grade level. And again, we only had 35.9% of students at that level 3 or 4, which was lower than both Bartow County and Georgia. So again, what it means for us is that we need to incorporate more common form of assessments so teachers are able to assess student learning more effectively before we get to the milestones end of grade assessments at the end of the year. Our end of grade summary results. For each of the 4 EOG milestones, we have more students performing at the beginning level than Bartow County and Georgia, and we have less students performing at the distinguished or level 4 level of proficiency than Bartow County and Georgia. Our strengths include 6th grade ELA and math, but our weaknesses include 7th grade ELA and 8th grade math. So what this means for us is that strategies used in 6th grade ELA and math classes need to be analyzed and adapted for 7th and 8th grade classes so we can continue those levels of proficiency as students move on to 7th and 8th grade. Our Lexile scores are lower than Bartow County for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So what this means for us is that we may need to see what other schools are doing to increase Lexile scores and what strategies they're incorporating to do so. We need to incorporate reading and writing skills into all 4 content areas, and teachers may need professional development on increasing Lexile scores using strategies in all 4 content areas. Our main goal throughout all this is to increase CCRPI. CCRPI comes from 4 different categories: 15% closing gaps, 30% content mastery, 35% progress, and 20% readiness. So our game plan needs to address these 4 content areas. Our CCRPI scores have been consistently lower than Bartow County schools and middle schools in Georgia. And again, our decrease was a 12-point decrease, so now our score is a 52.5, and that is out of 100. So we need to look at strategies that are being used in other Bartow County schools, and our game plan is to focus on specific students and subgroups to increase their scores. Our first subgroups and group of kids that we're going to focus on is our bubble kids. So we're going to identify the top 50% of those level 2 developing learners, and we're going to work with these students to get them to level 3 proficient. We're going to use different strategies to get those kids up to level 3. Many of these students are also in our subgroups, which is going to help closing gaps. So this strategy will help with closing gaps, will help with progress, and will help with content mastery. Our second point is going to be working with Lexiles and midpoints. So we're going to work with students who are not just in the range, but they have to be at and above the midpoint. So for example, this student, they scored within this stretch Lexile range, but their score was below this midpoint, so we do not get points towards CCRPI for this student. So we're going to work with students like this student who may have scored in the Lexile range, but they're below the midpoint. So we're going to work with these students to get them to the midpoint and above. So again, many of these students are in our subgroups, which also helps with closing gaps. So this strategy helps with closing gaps, with progress, and with readiness. In conclusion, where are we going to go from here? So CCRPI is dependent on milestone scores. We cannot get away from that. So without increasing those scores, it will be difficult to increase our CCRPI. We can work with school climate, we can work with attendance, but milestone scores are a big part of CCRPI. By working with our students who are close to reaching level 3 and students who are close to be at or above Lexile midpoint, we will increase CCRPI while improving student achievement. Our next steps include working with our PLC groups to develop common formative assessments. So teachers will work together to help guide instruction to increase student achievement in all content areas. Any questions, comments, and concerns, my email address is below, so you can email me with any question, comments, or concerns about the data overview.